Today, we're taking two-dimensional arrays to the next level by traversing them. So we peeked at this last time. We can get through a whole 2D array using loops and the same sort of algorithms we used with one-dimensional arrays and array lists. So often we'll use a pair of for loops. So check it out. I like to use R for the outer one, and R has to be less than dot length of the array. Remember, that's how many rows there are. And then I use C for the inner one. You don't have to, but I mean, it sure is easy when you're later thinking, am I talking about rows or columns? And if you're doing X and W, then you're having to always figure out what you're talking about. Remember, the number of columns is you get the first row, nums at 0, and get the length of that. Anyway, what this does, this would print out every element row by row, and then this println after the inner for loop goes to a new line after each row. And this is just a copy of one of the methods I did in your REPLs last week. I said last class, but last class we were at a Unity presentation. Anyway, the inner one you have to do print, and then put a space or a tab, and then the one that's after that inner loop has to be a println, so that it goes to a new line, and it kind of prints it in a little table. You can do the same thing with enhanced for loops, but it's a little tricky here. Notice this outer one, you don't just say int r colon nums, because what you're getting out of nums is a whole row, and you're getting an integer array that is the whole row. So you don't have to call it row, but I do rather than r, because r kind of implies like a single element. So I just call it row, int array row, and then in the inner for loop, we say int c, not int array, because we're getting each integer out of the row, which is an array. And if you do it this way, you just print c here. So I don't know, it might be better to have n there to make you not think it's a column. But you're going to have to do it both ways. And so the key here is the outer enhanced for loop has to be grabbing a whole row, so it's an int array, not just an int. And the inner one is just an int. All right, you can use two loops like this to add up all the values. Instead of printing in the middle, you would be adding to a counter variable or total variable. So here's conceptually: declare a total variable, put 0 into it, do a for loop for the rows, do a for loop for the columns, and then inside that loop, add up everything. And then you've added up everything in an array. I guess I'm showing you what we're doing. You know how to declare a total variable, put 0 in it, and then here's the outer for loop, here's the inner for loop. Remember that the columns is get the first row and get the length of that. And then, so here's an example. This is a method that adds up everything in a single column. So we've got a 2D array, and I'm telling you, I want you to just tell me, add up column 7. You would send over the array and a 7 here, and then this makes the sum variable. Notice you don't need two for loops if you're just going to add up a column. You need to go through the rows. Like you go over to column 7, and then you got to hit each row. That's what this does. I won't be asking you to do exactly this, but things like it today. Questions? If I just wanted to add up a particular row, notice my for loop does columns. And then down here, instead of doing R and C, it's using row, the variable that got sent in. So that's fixed. It's always the same row, but the columns, we go through all the columns. So I want to walk you through another example going step by step. So let's say we have a Boolean array called test results. It contains the results of a series of COVID tests of people in a grid. We're going to write code that scans through the whole thing and reports if there were any true results. So for this, I'm going to make a a flag variable. I'm calling it positive test found, and I'm putting false in it. All right, so Boolean positive test found equals false, because we haven't even started looking yet. We're going to start by saying, hey, we haven't found any. We haven't looked yet. Then I'm doing a for loop for the rows, test results dot length. And then I'm doing a for loop for the columns, test results at 0 dot length. We grab the whole first row, row 0, and we find out how long that is. And then inside, if test results are C, now notice I'm not saying equal true, because it's already a Boolean. This is an array of Boolean elements, so that thing is either true or false. If that's true, I set this to true. And then finally, after the for loop, I can check if that thing is now true, then I found something. If this was a method, you could just return true instead of having a flag variable. But remember, as I said, if this is the same as saying this, because this test results array is a Boolean array, so everything in it is either already true or false. And you don't have to say equal true or equal false if you're trying to do an if statement with a Boolean value. That's it. You're going to practice a lot. I'm going to have you do practice 1, practice 2, practice 3, and practice 4. Plus we have a half sheet. There's no practice 5 today.